When it comes to mounting Windows file shares in a Linux environment, you're going to want to use CIFS or CIFS. Now, there's a bit of a confusion between CIFS and SMB, but really CIFS is what we're going to want to use in Linux. We do have to pay attention to a couple things like how to properly form the server URL, or how we can tell the Linux server exactly what type of server we're talking about. And then we do have to specify credentials when we're connecting to most Windows shares. There are some cases where you don't need to authenticate to connect to a Windows share, but generally you have to have credentials in order to connect. Whether this is an actual Windows share or a Linux user running Samba, which is emulating the Windows file sharing environment. But anyway, CIFS and SMB, what's the deal there? Well, SMB stands for Server Message Block, and CIFS stands for Common Internet File System. Now, generally we're going to use CIFS to connect to a Windows file share, like I said. But if you talk to system administrators, especially those who have been around for a long time, they're going to say, stop using CIFS. We don't use CIFS anymore. It's really old technology. And in the world of Microsoft, that's true. So Microsoft has gone through several iterations of how they use SMB, or Server Message Block. SMB version 1 was referred to in the Microsoft world as CIFS. And so then when SMB 2 and 3 came out, if you connected with CIFS, you wouldn't have access to those newer features of SMB2 and SMB3. However, in the Linux world, which is the world that we're in right here, CIFS will connect to all of the SMB versions. So don't worry if somebody says don't use CIFS anymore. For our purposes, CIFS is exactly what you want to use to connect to a Microsoft Windows share. Now, connecting to a remote Samba share or Windows share using CIFS is really, really easy. In our folder here, I have an empty folder called test. So if we look in test, there's nothing in there. It's just empty. And we can use the mount command. Now, to use the mount command, we have to be root. So sudo mount-t, and of course the type now is CIFS, C-I-F-S, for Common Internet File System. We're going to say -o for options, and our first option is going to be username equals nugget1. That's the username on our remote server. And now if I just leave it this way and I don't specify a password, when I press enter it's going to prompt me for a password. But we can also put it all on one line if we don't mind having our password in plain text. We could also say password equals 1 chicken, which happens to be my password on the remote file server. And then we need to tell it what we want to connect to. And this is how you properly form it. // the name or IP address of the server. So 172.20.0.6 is the name of my server. / the file share name itself, which in my case is files. A space, and then where we want to mount it. Well, in my case, I want to mount it on this test folder that is in my current directory. Press enter, and it's going to mount it from the remote server. And well, it even put an icon on our desktop. That's pretty nice. But if we go into test and type ls, we're going to see, sure enough, there are files there that were not there before. And these are on the remote server. So if we type cd sudo umount test, and now we type ls test, see, it's empty again because those files were on the remote server, and once we disconnected, we no longer had access. Again, if you leave this password equals 1 chicken or password equals whatever the password is off, it will prompt you when you connect, so you don't have to have your password in plain text in your bash history file. Really, the most difficult part about mounting CIFS file systems or Windows file systems are that you do have to get that formatting correct, the // name of the server and then / name of the share, and you usually have to specify credentials, which is something you don't have to do in NFS. So as long as you have those things down, mounting a remote Windows share is really, really easy. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.